I'm going to try and keep this introduction brief because nobody really wants a long introduction before The Wizard of Oz, and pretty much everything there is to say about this film has been said multiple times over the years. We all know the stories of a horror show production, at least 12 writers, 5 directors involved at one point or another, and almost every cast member having to take a couple of days off for various injuries, including, I learnt this recently, Toto, who was out of action for 2 days after a crew member accidentally stepped on him. But that's more than I should actually mention, because it does feel wrong going into a screening of The Wizard of Oz and only talking about all the stuff that went wrong, or in hindsight is just a terrible idea. Because for many, no matter how old you are, it is this great escapist fantasy that even those stories, some of which are just rumours and folk tales, can't seem to detract from. Instead, I want to properly start by talking about one of the few widely agreed on great joys of the world, one of the few ways in which you can make perfection more perfect, and that's the Muppets. Now, the obvious link here would be to the Muppets' own take on The Wizard of Oz from the early 2000s, which isn't their best work. It's kind of around the quality of Muppets from Space. It's alright, but again, not their best work. Instead, I'm going to go for the slightly more tenuous link of The Muppets Christmas Carol, because famously there's the song from that film, When Love Is Gone, in the original cut, and then it was taken out in subsequent releases because Disney execs said that it was too emotional and kids wouldn't sit through and understand it. And so instead, for years, we got this version of the film that had a brief moment between Scrooge and Belle on the bridge that just cuts to Rizzo crying his eyes out for no real reason. And then after years of calls for it to be put back in, Disney saying that the version they had wasn't good enough quality so it would look inconsistent with the rest of the film, they finally happened to find a version that was good enough and added it in a couple of years ago. And in 1939, MGM execs tried to do the same thing with Somewhere Over the Rainbow. They claimed that it slowed down The Wizard of Oz, and apparently one or two questioned why Judy Garland was singing on a farm. On an unrelated note, less than 4 years later, Oklahoma would become a Broadway smash. And maybe the reason the execs had an issue with the song and felt that it slowed things down was because, unlike all of the musical numbers set in Oz, it's quite static. Alongside all the Kansas scenes being in black and white, leading to that sudden surprise each time the front door opens and colour slowly floods the screen, they're also very still. One of the things that I noticed when revisiting this film a week or two ago was that there's so much movement, which contrasts it with other films of the time. You look at the other Best Picture nominees that year, Gone with the Wind, which won, Goodbye Mr. Chips, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, there was an adaptation of Wuthering Heights. These are very talky films with largely static cameras. But you even look at musicals or dance films of the time, and the anarchic work of the Marx Brothers as well. The camera generally remains quite still, but in The Wizard of Oz, while the camera might not always be moving, because it faced the same limitations of very bulky cameras and sound systems as any other film, there's so much happening within the frame that in terms of physicality, not to mention the effects, there's this rolling energy created the whole time we're in this Technicolor world. It pushes that wonder and fantasy after having spent 20 minutes in a familiar Hollywood set. And perhaps the closest comparison from the time is Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which was released just 2 years before, and that had characters specifically designed to show off the squash, stretch and colour possible with animation. Now you can look at the ideas that with the song Dorothy's the only person in Kansas who sings in the film and what that could mean for the different worlds, whether one or both are real or not. You can say that if it wasn't for that number, then this musical wouldn't have a song until over 20 minutes in, but then all the musical numbers would be confined to Oz. But the main power of that particular song in the moment is that that's the dream that sparks the wonder. That's the wish. It's what everything in The Wizard of Oz rests on. And what the characters are after, what each of them wishes for, has this childlike simplicity. We're encouraged and reminded in the opening text of the film to watch, perhaps through the eyes of our inner child. It says, for nearly 40 years this story has given faithful service to the young in heart, and time has been powerless to put its kindly philosophy out of fashion. To those of you who have been faithful to it in return, and to the young in heart, we dedicate this picture. But no matter how old we are, aren't the things being wished for to some extent things that we all want throughout our lives? We all want to feel like we know things and have some of the answers. We all want to feel love. We all want to feel brave and confident in certain situations. We all want a sense of safety and a place to call home. And sometimes to realise that, maybe we do have to confront wicked witches and acknowledge the man behind the curtain. Yes, there's no place like home, but where home is, who it is, and who we are as part of it, that's a different matter, and perhaps one that we're constantly looking for the answers for and a sense of. Pursuing those dreams and wishes on either side of the rainbow. Within all the wonder, all the colour, movement and music, there is something very simple in the human desires that cause the characters to travel the yellow brick road and us along with them. One of the things that David Lynch loved in particular about the film, because after all this is being shown as part of the Lynchspirations season, was what he described as the immense emotional power amongst the elements of fear and things to dream about. And look, I sat and wrote this introduction and read it back and worried that I was simply writing something pretentious, almost grasping at straws for the sake of doing an introduction. Because all other times I've watched this film, I've watched it as a simple, well-made, enjoyable fantasy musical. But maybe part of that enjoyment and response does come unconsciously from something being there. Something which has inspired not just countless films and filmmakers over the decades since, but people and ideas in general. All thanks to a simple, still wish sung on a farm. Thank you so much everyone for your time. I really hope you enjoy seeing on the big screen The Wizard of Oz.